The Galactic Council begged, but humans turned their backs. The Galactic Council chamber was built to inspire awe. A monolithic structure floating in deep space, its towering crystalline walls shimmered with the reflected light of 1,000 stars. It was here, in the heart of the interstellar order, that the fate of civilizations was decided. And it was here, on this day, that humanity would break the universe itself. The chamber was packed with delegates, slimy-skinned diplomats, towering insectoid emperors, gas-based intelligences floating in containment spheres. They had all gathered for the emergency summit, their whispers buzzing like static across the vast amphitheater. At the center, standing alone, was Ambassador Elias Carter, representing the United Terran Directorate. Ambassador Carter, the Council's High Arbiter, a being of crystalline tendrils named Zildar, spoke with an artificial calm. "You are aware of the severity of this moment." Carter's expression was unreadable. "Oh, I'm aware, all right." Zildar's form pulsed with frustration. "Then you know what is at stake. The Council is facing a crisis beyond measure." The alien paused, its crystalline appendages shifting. "We need humanity." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Humanity. The upstart species that had, in the span of mere centuries, gone from an interstellar backwater to a force that could shake empires. They had defied galactic norms, broken blockades, outmaneuvered supposedly superior species, and emerged as the dominant power in multiple sectors. And now the Galactic Council was crumbling. "The Scarvok fleets have pushed into our core territories," Zildar continued. "The Drekhan have turned rogue. The Kavak's dominion is collapsing into civil war. Without intervention, the Council will fall." Carter's face was a mask of cold indifference. "Sounds like a mess." The chamber erupted. "Human arrogance. You are bound by the treaties. They can't refuse us. They wouldn't dare." Zildar raised a tendril, silencing the delegates. "We are prepared to offer concessions." That caught Carter's attention. He raised an eyebrow. "Concessions?" The High Arbiter hesitated. "A seat on the High Council." Another ripple of gasps. The High Council was sacred, its seats reserved only for the oldest and most revered civilizations. For centuries, humanity had been kept at arm's length, denied true influence despite their growing power. Now, in desperation, the Council was willing to break its own rules. Carter sighed, shaking his head. "It's too late." Zildar twitched. "What?" Carter looked up, his expression one of finality. "You think this is about a seat at your table? You think we care about scraps thrown at us in desperation?" The chamber fell into stunned silence. For decades, humanity fought and bled while the Council turned its back. We begged for aid when the Nyx raiders slaughtered our colonies. You ignored us. We pleaded for intervention when the Trask Syndicate blockaded our trade routes. You did nothing. When we finally took matters into our own hands, when we fought back, you called us reckless, dangerous, a threat to galactic stability. His voice was steel. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. We're done." Zildar's crystalline body darkened in shock. You cannot be serious." Carter stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate. "You used us when it was convenient. Now that you're burning, you expect us to save you?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Humanity is leaving the Council. Effective immediately." The uproar was instantaneous. "Madness. They can't abandon the Council. Without them we'll collapse." Zildar's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You cannot do this." Carter leaned in, his next words a death sentence. "We already did." Behind him, a massive holographic display ignited, showing a live transmission from Sol Command. Dozens of human warships, bristling with firepower, were leaving the Council's primary defense fleets, their engines flaring as they returned home. Humanity wasn't just refusing to help. They were pulling out completely. Zildar trembled. "You're condemning us to extinction." Carter's eyes were cold. "Welcome to the human experience." And with that, he turned his back on the Galactic Council. And humanity turned its back on the galaxy. The collapse begins. Ambassador Carter walked with purpose, his polished boots clicking against the crystalline floor of the Council chamber as he strode toward the exit. Behind him, chaos erupted in full. Delegates screamed, their languages overlapping in a cacophony of panic. Some hurled desperate pleas, others threats. But Carter didn't look back. As he reached the towering doors, a figure blocked his path, Vorktun, the war chief of the Rulak Dominion. The reptilian alien, standing nearly 8 feet tall, bristled with tension. His emerald scales glowed faintly under the chamber's lighting, his yellow eyes narrowed into slits. "You cannot leave," Vorik growled, his voice like grinding stones. Carter's expression remained unchanged. "Try and stop me." Vorik's claws twitched, but he hesitated. That single pause spoke volumes. Even the Rulak Dominion, one of the most war-hardened species in the Council, wasn't willing to push humanity now. Not after what they had proven. Not after the wars they had won. Instead, Vorik exhaled sharply through his nostrils. "This is a mistake." Carter tilted his head. "Maybe. But it's our mistake to make." The chamber's towering doors hissed open, revealing the long hallway beyond. Carter didn't wait for a response. He stepped through, leaving the Galactic Council in shambles behind him. The signal. Halfway down the corridor, Carter tapped a button on his wrist console. "Soul command, initiate full withdrawal." A calm, synthetic voice responded. "Acknowledged. All Terran forces disengaging." Across Council space, the message rippled outward. Humanity wasn't just pulling its diplomats. It was pulling everything. On the border worlds, entire fleets disengaged from their defensive positions. Stations that had served as critical supply hubs powered down, their operators abandoning them. High-tech terraforming systems, which had stabilized entire planets, were shut off. Trade convoys canceled their routes. Within minutes, dozens of species who had relied on human infrastructure were suddenly stranded. The breaking point. Inside the Council chamber, Zildar trembled as it received update after update. The collapse had begun faster than anyone had anticipated. The Terran Defense Fleet at the Perron Expanse is gone, a Kavax delegate stammered, his feathered crest puffing out in panic. Their cyber relays have been shut down, added a Drekhan warlord, his chitinous fingers tapping furiously at a data slate. We're losing access to the human trade networks. Then came the final blow. A new transmission flared across the Council's primary communications array. A deep, rumbling voice spoke in thickly accented Galactic Standard. "This is Overlord Krall of the Scarvok Empire. The humans are gone. The prey is unprotected. The hunt begins." The chamber fell into stunned silence. And then chaos. The Scarvok were the Council's worst nightmare made real, a warlike species that had been kept at bay solely because of humanity's military presence. Now with the Terrans gone, they were free to unleash their full fury. "This is your fault," a Jakari envoy screeched, pointing a trembling claw at Zildar. "We must beg the humans to return," another shouted. Zildar remained motionless. Humanity wouldn't come back. They had made that clear. Earth's response. On Luna Prime, the capital of the United Terran Directorate, Carter stood before the Directorate Council, a collection of humanity's top leaders. President Marissa Vale leaned forward, her sharp blue eyes scrutinizing him. "It's done?" Carter nodded. "The Council is imploding as we speak." Vale exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and wariness on her face. "And the Scarvok?" Carter hesitated. "They wasted no time. They'll attack within days." Around the room, murmurs spread among the officials. Some looked uneasy. Others grim. Admiral Reese Calder smirked from his seat. "Good. Let them bleed." Vale shot him a look. "Billions will die, Reese." "They didn't care when it was our people dying," the Admiral said bluntly. "Now they learn what it means to be abandoned." Carter folded his arms. "They'll come crawling back." Vale frowned. "And what do we do when they do?" For a moment no one spoke. The weight of the decision hung over them. Then Carter exhaled. "We make them beg." The first attacks. 3 days later the Scarvok fleet struck. The first target was Kalthos Prime, a core world that had never known war. The Scarvok tore through its orbital defenses in hours. Cities burned as the once proud Council forces were overwhelmed. Evacuation efforts collapsed. Billions screamed for help. No one came. Across the galaxy more worlds fell. The Kavax Dominion fractured entirely, its warlords turning on each other. The Drekhan homeworld was besieged. The once mighty Council, which had ruled for millennia, found itself powerless. And humanity? Humanity watched. From the Sol system, Terran satellites intercepted the desperate distress calls. Some begged. Some raged. But not a single human ship left Terran space. A desperate plea. On the ruined surface of Kalthos Prime, a battered transmission array flickered to life. A figure, covered in soot and blood, stumbled into frame. Zildar. His crystalline body was cracked, fractures running along his once pristine form. His voice, usually calm and regal, was now ragged with desperation. "Humans, please." The transmission reached Sol Command. Carter watched in silence as Zildar dropped to his knees. We were wrong. Static. We need you. A long pause filled the control room. Vale sighed. Well, there it is. Admiral Calder scoffed. Let them rot. But Carter just watched, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he turned to the transmission officer. Keep the line open. And for the first time in history, the Galactic Council begged. The price of redemption. The transmission room was silent except for the crackling of static. Zildar's battered form flickered on the hollow screen, kneeling in the ruins of Kalthos Prime. The once proud council speaker reduced to a desperate plea. Humans, please. The signal cut out for a moment, then returned weaker. His voice was strained. We were wrong. We need you. Admiral Calder snorted. Pathetic. President Vale exhaled slowly. He's the first to admit it. That's something. Not enough, Calder shot back. Where was this humility when human colonies burned? When our people begged for aid? He leaned forward, eyes hard. They spat on us, called us savages, laughed at our barbaric ways. He gestured toward the screen. And now the galaxy bleeds and suddenly we're the ones who have to save them? Carter remained silent, studying Zildar's trembling form. The alien's crystalline exoskeleton, once immaculate and regal, was cracked and coated in soot. Behind him, fires raged, turning the skyline of Kalthos Prime into a hellscape. Vale folded her hands together. If we don't intervene, billions more will die. Calder scowled. And if we do intervene, we reinforce the same cycle. They'll leech off us, then toss us aside when they don't need us anymore. Carter finally spoke, his voice measured. They need to learn. Calder raised an eyebrow. Learn what? That there's a price, Carter said simply. A lesson written in blood. The terms of surrender. Hours later, the Soul Command Relay fired back a response. Across the battered remnants of the Galactic Council, the message spread like wildfire. It wasn't a promise of salvation. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a list. Terms of Terran engagement. 1. The Galactic Council is dissolved. Permanently. Humanity will not rescue a government that abandoned them. 2. Humanity dictates all new governance within former Council space. 3. All non-human militaries are disarmed. All remaining fleets are to be surrendered or dismantled. 4. Humanity is to be compensated for every life lost. The former Council worlds will serve humanity's interests for a full century. The message ended with a final line, one that sent a chill through every surviving alien leader. No negotiations. No debates. You accept or you die. The Council fractures. The response was immediate and chaotic. Some species, like the Jakari and Kavax, agreed almost instantly. Their worlds were in ruins, their people on the verge of extinction. Pride no longer mattered. Survival did. But others? We will never bow to humanity, Vorktun snarled, his reptilian form trembling with rage. You wish to replace the Council with your empire? We will fight to the last. Admiral Calder smirked. That's the idea. The Rulak Dominion and a handful of other stubborn species outright rejected the terms. Within hours, they rallied their remaining fleets, forming a desperate coalition to resist humanity's ultimatum. Vale sighed as the reports came in. They never learn. Carter merely turned to Soul Command. Deploy the fleet. The Wrath of Terra. The war lasted exactly 1 week. The Rulak Dominion's last stand was a desperate, chaotic engagement at the Yalos Expanse. Hundreds of ships, cobbled together from whatever remained, faced off against the Terran Armada. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Human warships descended like judgment incarnate, their weapons precise, merciless. The Rulak fleets shattered within hours. Entire planets, once proud bastions of resistance, were left smoldering. One by one, the remaining factions surrendered. At the end of the week, Vorktun himself was dragged before a Terran tribunal. Bloodied, beaten, his emerald scales dulled with defeat, he glared up at Carter from his knees. You are monsters, he rasped. Carter didn't flinch. No. We're human. A single gunshot ended the last opposition. The new order. With resistance crushed, the reconstruction began, but not in the way the aliens had hoped. Earth did not rebuild the Galactic Council. It did not restore order. It enforced it. The capital world of the former Council, Arentis Prime, was stripped of its name, rechristened New Terra, the seat of human rule. The surviving species were not granted autonomy. They were assigned territories, protectorates under Terran law. A new governing body was established, But it was not a council of equals. It was the Terran Directorate. And every major decision, every law, was dictated by humanity alone. Zildar, the former speaker, now served as a mere administrator under human oversight. His species, once the wealthiest in the galaxy, now worked in service to Terran industry. And the Scarvok? Extinct. Humanity had ensured they would never threaten another world again. The final message. 1 year after the fall of the Council, Carter stood before the new Directorate Assembly, surveying the chamber. It was filled with representatives from every species, but they were not equals. They were subordinates. He activated a transmission. Attention Galaxy. Every surviving world tuned in. The message was broadcast to every sector, every colony. You once called us savages. You mocked our wars, our struggles. You thought yourselves our betters. And when we needed you, you turned your backs. His voice hardened. We do not forget. We do not forgive. He leaned forward. The era of humanity's mercy is over. The message ended. And across the galaxy, under the shadow of Terran rule, the alien species finally understood. Humanity had not saved them. Humanity had conquered them. The Age of Terra. The silence that followed Carter's final transmission was absolute. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings sat frozen in fear, realization, or quiet, seething rage. This was no salvation. This was a declaration. The Galactic Council was dead. The old order was no more. Humanity had taken its place. But conquest was only the beginning. Now came the true test: control. The Iron Rule. On New Terra, formerly Arentis Prime, the Terran Directorate wasted no time in reshaping the galactic order. Former Council worlds were broken into Terran sectors, each ruled by a human-appointed overseer. The old bureaucracies were shattered. Governments were dissolved. Every planetary decision, trade, law, military actions, was now dictated by human governance. Some species adapted quickly, eager to survive under human rule. The Jakari, once traders, became logistical coordinators in the new empire. The Kavaks, engineers by nature, were granted conditional autonomy in exchange for their technological advancements. But others resisted. It was a mistake. On Velos 9, a former council stronghold, riots erupted after the local populace rejected human oversight. Protesters filled the streets, chanting, pleading for independence. The Terran response was immediate. Orbital bombardment reduced the capital city to rubble. Millions perished in a single day. The message was clear: disobedience would not be tolerated. Across the galaxy, resistance cells tried to rise. Secret gatherings whispered conspiracies. They spoke of rebellion, of reclaiming their sovereignty. But Earth had learned from history. Before any uprising could gain traction, they were extinguished, not with overwhelming force, but with something far more terrifying: precision. Rebel leaders vanished overnight. Weapons caches were sabotaged before they could be used. Key figures turned up dead, assassinated by unseen hands. Entire insurrections collapsed before they could begin. The Directorate had eyes everywhere. And it was watching. A galaxy on its knees. The Scarvok, once a species feared for their brutality, no longer existed. Their homeworld was a glass planet, bombarded until it was nothing but scorched rock. The Rulak Dominion, the last species to openly oppose humanity, now lived under forced labor contracts. Their worlds became industrial hubs, fueling the endless expansion of the Terran Empire. Even the once proud Zildar, former Speaker of the Council, had been reduced to nothing more than a Terran administrator, a puppet stripped of power, forced to oversee the subjugation of his own people. But there was one problem: hatred. Across the galaxy, the conquered species did not forget what had happened. They obeyed, but they did not submit. And humanity knew it. The experiment. On Drakenhold, an isolated Terran research facility, a team of scientists worked in secrecy. Their task? To end the cycle. Humanity had seen it before. The rise and fall of empires. The endless struggle between conqueror and conquered. The Directorate did not just want obedience. It wanted loyalty. Thus, the Drakenhold Initiative was born. Through a combination of genetic conditioning, neuroimplantation, and psychological reprogramming, the scientists sought to reshape the very fabric of alien minds. Make them love their human rulers. The first subjects were volunteers, former council officials who had accepted Terran rule in exchange for power. The results were staggering. Within weeks, they no longer spoke of the past. No longer resented humanity's dominion. Instead, they worshipped it. The program expanded. Entire generations of alien young were raised under the new system, taught that humanity was not their enemy but their savior. And in time the hate began to fade. Not through force, through belief. The final resistance. But not everyone succumbed. Deep in the uncharted fringes of space, in asteroid belts and abandoned colonies, a hidden force began to gather. The last remnants of the old Galactic Council. The children of those who had died under human rule. They called themselves the Eclipse Initiative. Led by a former Rulak admiral and a Kovacs engineer, they knew direct war was impossible. Humanity was too powerful. Their fleets were unstoppable. So they turned to guerrilla warfare. Supply convoys vanished. Strategic outposts were sabotaged. Entire sectors fell into chaos. The Directorate responded with unrelenting force, hunting them across the stars. But the rebels had learned well, from humans themselves. For every base destroyed, 2 more emerged in the shadows. The war was not over. It was just changing. A future written in blood. Carter stood on the bridge of the TSV Dominion, watching the stars beyond the viewport. A year had passed since humanity had seized control of the galaxy. And yet, despite their victories, the battle never truly ended. For every world they conquered, another resisted. For every rebellion they crushed, another was born. This was the price of empire. Vale stepped beside him. They'll never accept it, you know? Carter exhaled slowly. Maybe not. He turned to her. But they will never again challenge humanity. She hesitated. And if they do? He met her gaze, eyes cold as the void. Then we remind them why they lost. In the darkness of space, under the banner of the Terran Directorate, the galaxy moved forward. Not in peace. Not in unity. But under the iron rule of humanity. Epilogue, the whispered prophecy. Somewhere in the outer rim, a Kovacs elder sat before a group of younglings. His voice, raspy and aged, wove a story passed through generations. The humans rose because they were strong. He looked at each of them, his cybernetic eye flickering. But strength never lasts forever. The children listened in silence. There will come a day when they falter. Pause. When their grip weakens. When the cracks in their empire begin to show. The elder's mechanical fingers curled into a fist. And when that day comes, his voice dropped to a whisper. We will be ready. The flame in the center of the room flickered. And in the distant reaches of the galaxy, beyond the reach of Terran eyes, the first embers of rebellion began to glow. Humanity had won. For now. The end.